Miami's defense had been winning the majority of the battles in fall practice, but on Saturday, the offense fired back.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I mean, you just knew Cam Ward and company would have a response. I am Alex Donno. Happy Sunday, by the way. Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So the pads have been on over the past several days at Miami Hurricanes training camp. And on Saturday, Miami held their first scrimmage of fall camp. Now, details coming out of these scrimmages, Mario Cristobal keeps these things on lockdown. The details are always scarce, but here's what we've got so far. And a lot of this comes from Mario Cristobal himself. Miami Hurricanes head coach did speak with Don Bailey Jr. on a video that went to Miami's official YouTube channel after the scrimmage. So here's some background on the offense versus defensive dynamics we've had so far. And you guys all know that one of the big buzz slogans around Miami Hurricanes facility is iron sharpens iron. And that's something that's been going on. Also on this episode today, we will talk about some details emerging about clock management, knowing when to take the knee. Are those issues going to come up again this season? Miami has added a legendary wide receivers coach to their extended coaching staff. But for this offense versus defensive dynamic so far, we talked about it a lot here on Locked On Canes. And, about the first week or so of practices, the early parts of practice were open to the media. We've gotten a chance to talk with players and coaches throughout the process. And in the early days, the consensus had been, while things were competitive, the defense had, by and large, been getting the better of the offense. Cam Ward, Miami's starting quarterback, said that after the first day of practice. After about the first week of practice, Mario Cristobal said that the defense had been winning the lion's share of those reps, because our understanding is that the defensive line at times has been positively disruptive. We've identified players like Akeem Mesidor, returning from injury, as one of the very top practice performers so far, along with some of the usual suspects like Ruben Hurricane Bain, Kiko Mauinoa, who's back from injury. He missed the spring. Linebacker Wesley Besaint, I've been told by multiple folks, including teammates and coaches of his, that Wesley Besaint is someone who's absolutely set to break out, that he's playing his best football, at least his best practice football. We expect it to translate into games that he's played so far in a Miami Hurricanes uniform, that he really seems to be peaking at this point. You also have newcomers on the defensive line who weren't here for spring. Simeon Barrow, that dude's a monster. Tyler Barron has been really good. These guys have been turning heads since arriving. And I continue to be very high on Elijah Alston, who arrived back in January. Somebody recently asked me, like, Donno, how come you guys aren't talking as much about Elijah Alston? Well, we've been talking so much about the newcomers like Barron and Barrow who weren't here during spring that I'm covering for the first time, that maybe we were taking Elijah Alston for granted a little bit. This is the guy who was the top-rated FBS pass rusher last season while at Marshall, according to Pro Football Focus. PFF absolutely loves Elijah Alston. So, yeah, guys like that have been super, super disruptive on the defensive line, and they've given the offense a hard time. But then the tables have turned. You love to hear about this counterpunch. In the Saturday scrimmage, Mario Cristobal said the day belonged to the offense. He said the offense created more separation and more air. The offense adjusted, he said, to the speed of the defense. And, folks, the way that the early days of fall camp played out, it's not too surprising, because usually this time of year, or at least that time of year, when you're talking about the first week and a half of practices, the defense is usually ahead. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why the Saturday scrimmage apparently was more favorable to the offense. But, when you have a guy like Cam Ward, who is as competitive as he is, when you have, in Miami's case, the most productive returning wide receiver core in the ACC, because you had 3 guys on that receiving core who put up at least 800 receiving yards last year. The transfer Sam Brown being one of them, along with Xavier Restrepo, who was over 1,000 yards last year. Jacoby George. I think Isaiah Horton is someone who's going to break out sooner than later. You've got the talent there at wide receiver. You've got a tight end room that I understand is being slept on a little bit because they didn't produce much in the passing game last year, but I believe that they will this year. And your quarterback is one of the more competitive individuals I've ever encountered. So you knew the offense was going to counterpunch. They were going to adjust to the speed of the defense. And as for how that scrimmage played out, one of the things that Mario Cristobal mentioned was that an impressive third down play, a big-time third down conversion by the offense early on in the scrimmage, that's something that really sparked their momentum. They were able to carry that momentum throughout the scrimmage. And here's something, folks, that should make us all feel good, because we talked about how disruptive the defensive line has been in practices. This is going back to that iron sharpens iron mantra. I keep hearing that the offensive line has been looking really, really, really good throughout fall practices. Some of that I've seen with my own eyes during the media viewing periods, but I'm also hearing the offensive line really excelled during that scrimmage on Saturday. I wonder, and I have a feeling Miami might be close to selecting that starting left guard. The guys competing for that are Matthew McCoy and Samson Okunlola. But if Miami is close to figuring out who the starter is, they're keeping that very close to the vest. I do not know yet. We may not know for sure until we see who lines up first play against the Florida Gators. But we've heard really good things about the offensive line, and those who were able to watch that VIP closed scrimmage were really pumping up the entire offensive line. Supposedly the whole group performed very well throughout the scrimmage. And, you know, why that should make you all feel good is when you think about who Miami's quarterback is, and you think about the numbers that Cam Ward was able to put up at Washington State, and doing so having a bottom tier offensive line that had him running for his life throughout games, with virtually no protection last year, Cam Ward still managed at Wazoo to throw for 3,735 yards and 25 touchdown passes. If you can give that man, who obviously is also capable of extending plays, improvising, running a little bit, but if you give that guy an actual clean pocket and actual protection, and he's not running for his life and needing to improvise on every single play, I can only imagine what Cam Ward can do at Miami. Damian Martinez, Miami's new transfer running back, is someone who's been mentioned as a standout over recent practices. We had a conversation about him with Gio Milian on Friday. Gio also, by the way, mentioned that A.J. Allen is doing very well. A.J. Allen, who had a pretty good season in Miami last year, this guy sometimes gets overlooked and forgotten. And I'm not calling anybody else. I'm also guilty of that sometimes, not talking about A.J. Allen enough, because we get obviously so excited about Mark Fletcher, who deserves that excitement, Jordan Lyle, Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, you know, we talk Chris Johnson. We talk about, and by the way, Chris Johnson, I heard, had a very good scrimmage as well. That was someone who was mentioned by CaneSinsight.com, that Chris Johnson had a good scrimmage. Miami speedster running back. D-Money at Canes Insight also mentioned O.J. Frederic, the freshman defensive back. That was a name that he singled out as doing really well. So elsewhere on that offense, I love the competition in the wide receiver room. We talked about those 3 receivers who return over 800 yards receiving from last season. You know, Sam Brown, who transferred in from Houston, being one of those. The times I've been able to see Brown in person early in camp, he's looked excellent in the viewings, whereas Isaiah Horton is also looking very good. He's maybe the most improved player, one of the most improved players on the team since last season. Cam Ward has specifically mentioned Horton as someone who's really breaking out right now. I've also routinely watched younger guys who, you know, probably aren't going to start, but are going to get on the field, like Nathaniel Ray Joseph, Josiah Trader, Nye Carr. I've seen these guys pop in practice. The early looks that I've gotten on Chance Robinson, he looks the part. I think he's going to be really good as well. He's a true freshman who, unfortunately for him, wasn't here for spring football, so he's playing catch up a little bit. And Robbie Washington, in his second year, I think can also be a weapon. Got a few more scrimmage details that were shared from CaneSport.com that I want to relay to you guys, but bottom line, folks, what is today? August. You know I'm not good with dates. Hold on. Today is August the 11th, the 12th? I don't know, but we're getting closer to August 31st. August 31st against the Florida Gators is going to be here before we know it. We're starting to get pumped. We're starting to get excited. We have so much more to get to. We're nowhere near done on this brand new episode of Locked on Canes. You want to keep it locked. And I'm only getting started with eBay Motors because passion, drive, and patience, that's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time and your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you to the Everydayers for making Locked on Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you make Locked on ACC your second listen. I co-host that show with Kenton Gibbs from Locked on Wolfpack, and this coming week, we're going to be doing comprehensive previews for every football team in the Atlantic Coast Conference. It is preview season. We're just a couple weeks away from Florida State playing Georgia Tech in Ireland. I guess we're all Georgia Tech fans. I don't know. We'll see how that one plays out. Florida State obviously has a lot of talent, even though they lost some players from last year. But maybe the Yellow Jackets can pull off a stunner over there in Ireland. So you want to make sure you make Locked on ACC your second listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. So here was a tidbit that Gary Furman from CaneSport.com shared about the scrimmage. And this might explain why the offense was able to perform so well in the scrimmage, because it was more of a level playing field just in terms of the format. He writes, the format of a scrimmage is more advantageous to the offense, he says, because scrimmage, it's not scripted like a formal or like a normal practice typically would be. He says they can call their plays like a real game, take advantage of things schematically, etc. He says, we hear Cam Ward had his best day of the fall. Whew, how about that? Was really on point, and that Emory Williams, he says, was a shade more consistent today than Reese Poffenbarger. That's specifically on the scrimmage. And you know, we had a question recently from one of our Locked on Canes insiders about, you know, how Emory Williams looks after his broken arm. First of all, thankfully for him, the broken arm that he suffered against Florida State last year was the non-throwing arm. Now, that didn't make his injury any less painful, and I'm so sorry he had to go through that because that looked rough. But being the left arm, not the right arm, he was able to recover a little bit more quickly. And honestly, even going back to spring, because Emory Williams was full go for spring football, not just here for fall camp, you would never know the dude suffered an injury. No restrictions. He's not wearing a brace or anything like that. Like, Emory Williams looks fine, and he's been practicing well going back to spring football. Apparently has carried that with him into fall camp as well. And I think there's a legit competition for backup quarterback. I'm a big fan of Reese Poffenbarger as well. You guys know that. And Reese has an experience advantage over Emory Williams because Emory Williams has started 2 games and Reese has started 2 seasons. So there's an experience disadvantage for Emory that could play in Poffenbarger's favor. But I mean, ideally, you would hope, Cam Ward starts and plays in every game this year, and that you don't actually need a backup except for mop-up duty, and then you can redshirt Emory Williams, who hasn't had an opportunity to redshirt yet, redshirt Judd Anderson, and then keep Reese Poffenbarger as your backup. But in terms of like who would actually straight up win the backup job, it's a really close competition, I believe, between the two of them. On CaneSport, they also note that Damian Martinez had a long run early. He's looked the part so far in Miami. They say all the receivers and running backs had their moments, but the wide receiver position will get as much attention as any going into week 2 to increase their level of play. He says the bottom line, though, is that it was a very hot day that tested the team's conditioning. And from what we heard, they came out of it very positively in that regard. Yeah, I mean, and people, like, sometimes when I'm at practice and I take pictures that are inside the indoor facility, people are like, Why are they practicing inside? These guys are soft. They go out, assuming it's not lightning, they do go outside for about half or more of the practices every single day. They do a lot of indie drills, individual drills, and warm-ups inside the indoor facility. They do practice at least half, if not a majority, outside, and they prepare for that. And they're going to have to prepare for that because, for as hot as it is in Miami, our heat is like unparalleled. But Gainesville, they're landlocked. They don't get the sea breeze that we get in South Florida. 3:30 p.m. August 31st in the swamp. We're going to have to be ready for that. I know we will be. I know we'll be ready for it. I know Florida obviously will be ready for it. The humidity is not going to be the reason that either team wins that game, but both teams need to be prepared for that. But yeah, you like to know that the conditioning has been tested. This is really cool, and kudos to Canes Insight, who I think were the first to report this. So shout out to our friend Peter, Ariz, D Money, and the guys on this. So Miami has hired a legendary wide receiver coach to join their extended coaching staff. The Canes have added one of the most respected coaches on the planet to its extended staff in Jerry Sullivan. I've heard this name a lot throughout the years. He's a 25-year NFL veteran and Miami native. He went to Jackson High School. Sullivan, per Canes Insight, has been working with the receivers and wide receiver Kevin Beard throughout camp. And it's funny that they post this because I remember at some of the practices seeing somebody that I didn't recognize. And I think I even, like, one of the other reporters asked me, hey, do you know who that is? I'm like, I don't. I figured it was an analyst. I think that must have been Jerry Sullivan, who I saw at practice, that I didn't realize. They say he's considered by many to be the greatest wide receivers coach of all time. And that guy's now on the extended staff. He's worked with Pro Bowlers, Anthony Miller, Tony Martin, Herman Moore, Jermaine Crowell, David Boston, Anquan Bolden, Allen Robinson, and also Larry Fitzgerald. They write at Canes Insight, Larry Fitzgerald, an all-pro and future Pro Football Hall of Famer, credits Sullivan for helping him groom him into one of the top wide receivers in NFL history. An article on his work with Justin Jefferson, who calls him his sensei, is also available there at Canes Insight. So, yeah, Jerry Sullivan now on Miami's extended staff. So you guys remember a couple months ago, the NCAA had created a new rule where analysts, and Miami has a lot of analysts on the staff, are now actually allowed to provide on-field instruction. So you have someone like Jerry Sullivan, now a legend, on your staff, who's actually able to work hands-on with players during practices and games, because that's now allowed by the rules. And I also, the part of that story that doesn't fly under my radar is the fact that Sullivan and Kevin Beard have already been working together. So they seem to have already created a shorthand and a chemistry, because obviously Sullivan doesn't want to overstep Kevin Beard or, teach techniques or philosophies in a way that doesn't mesh with Miami's wide receivers coach, because that's what Kevin Beard is. So hopefully the two of them, and I believe because KB is a great collaborator. Kevin Beard is not a my way or the highway type of guy. KB is someone who works very, very well with others. So if the two of them have created a good shorthand working relationship already, the people who are going to benefit from that are the Xavier Restrepos, the Jacoby Georges, the Ray Josephs, the Isaiah Hortons, the Sam Browns, the Josiah Traders. I can go on and on and on. These guys are really going to be able to benefit from having a legendary wide receivers coach like Jerry Sullivan working with them. I absolutely love to hear that. So, okay. I think we've come closer, or we're coming closer to answering a question that I have received. I will make a conservative estimate that I've received this question 11 million times since last October, about clock management, late game management, taking knees, taking timeouts. Here's a detail on how that's going to go this coming season. My friends, we're not done yet. It's Sunday, by the way. We're here on a weekend working for you. Locked On Canes never sleeps. I laid in bed with my eyes wide open thinking, August 31st, Gator game, the swamp, I'm ready. Why is it not August 31st? I can't even sleep until after that game happens. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Hey guys, with the season coming up, it's time to start locking in your bets at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Miami, 2.5-point favorites at the Swamp to open up the season. Over under 9.5 wins for Miami, plus 450 to win the ACC. These are the wagers you can start locking in preseason, my friends. And FanDuel has you covered. They've gotten us through the summer with our Olympic bets, Major League Baseball, international soccer. I had a bunch of bets during the UFC fight card over the weekend. And this summer, it's still summer, remember, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. To the everydayers, if you want to take that everydayer experience to the next level, sign up to become a Locked On Canes insider. I include a link in the show description below. Click that link, sign up. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, recruiting scoops, one-on-one questions and answers. We answer a lot of insider questions on the shows. We'll be doing that throughout the week coming up. Try it free for 14 days. Click that link below, become an insider for free. If you like it, after 14 days, you can opt in for $4.99 a month, give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. So this this update at CaneSport.com, Miami's On3 site from my guy Gary Furman, who's great. I've known Gary for many years, and he's been covering Miami from. I think Gary looks like he's about 50, and yet he's been covering Miami for 60 years. I don't know how this works with him. He's been around forever, but he wrote this post on CaneSport's message board that said, Mario has improved internal checks and balances and responsibilities to make sure the Georgia Tech mistakes do not happen again. To which he writes, I will be surprised if you ever see that again. They have done extensive work on clock management of the last 2 minutes of a game, he said. So we don't have, further details on exactly what that entails, but I'm sure, given just, how unnecessary that mistake was and how embarrassing that mistake was and how costly that mistake was, because the difference between being an 8-4 regular season and a 7-5 regular season team it's pretty massive. That Miami could have been in a much bigger bowl game if not for what that amounts to. And, it's just a mark you don't want to have on your resume. So I have zero doubt, because something I know, and covering Mario Cristobal is a pleasure, by the way. And I know first of all, he wants his teams to be the best, and he loves Miami. Like, he wants Miami to be back in the spot that they were in the late 80s and early 90s when Mario Cristobal played at Miami. Like, he wants to bring Miami back to that. So I have no doubt that going back to last October, there has been a ton of self-reflection and a ton of internal checks and balances. And so they'll probably never reveal to us the exact dynamics of what's going on here, but I would assume the big thing that they would have to improve to make sure that Georgia Tech fiasco of not taking the knee or not knowing they should take a knee or could take a knee, that will never happen again. To me, communication is the most important thing. You have to have a line of final 2 minutes, whether it just means you and your offensive coordinator have an open dialogue, because maybe one of them realized that the knee could have been taken, but the other one didn't call that play. You need to have open dialogue with your offensive coordinator. And, we talk about all the analysts that Miami has on the staff. If you just have to have someone that's on your headset who's the final 2 minute expert, go find the best EA Sports college football player in the country and get that. I kid. I'm kind of kidding on that, but find that guy. Our guy Gio Million, this guy's a huge nerd when it comes to EA College Football 25. Get Gio Million on the headset. Final 2 minutes. Gio, do we take the knee? Do we call a timeout? You have to have those lines of communication open, but there's a lot of art that comes with that, because you don't just want to have an open headset where, anybody on the sidelines, you have 6 or 7 assistant coaches and all the voices get muddied and stuff. No, you want to have a very organized checks and balances system for the final 2 minutes of a half, final 2 minutes of games. Let's also remember the final 2 minute dynamic is going to change a little bit this year, because college football has added a 2 minute warning. So you're also going to have that, which is essentially a free timeout now with 2 minutes to go, that you can plan around that. So that probably makes the dynamic easier, at least from where I sit, because again, it's a free timeout, but that also requires an extra factor to manage. So, hopefully that issue, which was painful for every Miami fan, we hate reliving that moment from the Georgia Tech game. It's painful. I still have nightmares about it, but hopefully that created a learning point where they've now created a system of checks and balances where, like Gary Furman said, something like that can never happen again. Folks, I appreciate you being here on this new Sunday episode of Locked on Canes. Make sure you smash that like button. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash that like button and subscribe to Locked on Canes on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you get your pods. And we're going to be back on Monday. Tomorrow, Brian Smith, my colleague at Athlon Sports, is going to join us. He's also the recruiting expert on the Locked On Network. We're going to talk some preseason because we're getting there, folks. August 31st is going to be here before you know it. We're going to talk some recruiting with Brian. Oh, here's something before we run. This is something notable on the recruiting front. We all know that one of Miami's top targets, 5-star targets remaining on their board, is defensive lineman Jose Epinesa. Jose Epinesa, I don't know if this was something people knew about beforehand, but he showed up over the weekend at an Iowa open practice, which seems like, it's not an insignificant update in his recruitment because Iowa is one of the teams along with Miami, Utah, and Mizzou that are right near the top of Jose Epinesa's recruitment. And Iowa holds the sentimental edge because his father played there. He's got a brother who's in the NFL now who played there. He's got family ties to Iowa. So I think there was an Iowa expert on either On 3 or 24/7 who dropped a prediction for Epinesa to land at Iowa. So again, it's not over. Just letting you guys know, Epinesa showed up to an Iowa practice. So Jose, if you want to show up to a Miami practice coming up this week, they'll keep the doors open for you, man. We'll talk more about him this week. You guys want to keep it locked. We'll talk to you Monday on another episode of Locked on Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.